You've had the thought, maybe late at night, maybe right after a conversation went wrong, maybe while driving when there's nothing to distract you from it. The quiet, persistent suspicion that you might actually be a bad person, not a monster, not someone who deliberately sets out to damage people, just someone who keeps falling short in the same ways, who carries things long past the point when the other person has moved on, who wonders in the specific silence of 3 a.m. what it says about you that you can't seem to get this right. That thought doesn't have a name. For most men, it never gets said out loud, so it just lives there, quiet, and occasionally devastating. Here's what's actually going on. Sign 1. The standard that has no bottom. You did something wrong. Maybe recently, maybe years ago. And instead of processing it and moving forward, you're still running the case, revisiting the evidence, going over what you should have done differently. Here's the thing that makes it worse. If a friend sat across from you and told you this exact story, the same situation, the same words, the same outcome, you'd have absolved them in about 30 seconds. You'd contextualize it. You'd remind them that people make mistakes. You've done that for other people. You know how to do it. But that door doesn't open from the inside. Research on the Big Five personality model consistently shows that people who score high in conscientiousness, those with strong internal values, and a disciplined sense of self-accountability, also show the highest rates of self-attributed blame when things go wrong. Not because they're actually more responsible for outcomes, because their internal architecture is calibrated to hold themselves accountable in ways most people's simply doesn't engage. That's not weakness. That's moral wiring with nowhere to discharge. Sign 2. You don't perform your guilt. When you've hurt someone, you don't apologize 5 times. You don't cry in front of them. You don't make a visible display of remorse. You go quiet. You withdraw. You pull back into yourself and stay there for a while. And they read that as not caring, as coldness, as you not being sorry. Some of them have probably said so directly. And the accusation lands because you can't prove the alternative. And they're not entirely wrong about the effect you have. But a study published in the Journal of Personality found that in people with high emotional regulation, visible guilt expression, and internally felt guilt have almost no correlation. The people who seem least affected on the outside are sometimes experiencing the most intense distress internally. Your quiet isn't absence of remorse. It's what remorse looks like when it goes somewhere real instead of somewhere performative. The problem is that performative remorse reads as human, and genuine remorse makes you look like you don't care while you're doing anything but. Sign 3. A perfect memory for the times you failed. You can recall specific conversations from years ago. The exact words. The look on their face. Things the other person has long since forgotten or moved on from, or doesn't even know were significant to you. Your brain flagged those moments as unresolved. Soviet psychologist Bluma Zygarnik documented this in 1927. The mind clings to incomplete emotional experiences with disproportionate intensity, returning on a loop until something closes the loop. Which is why you can forget where you left your keys, but can recite word for word a conversation from 8 years ago that ended badly. A man I know spent 11 years replaying a single phone call. His father had called on a Tuesday evening, and he'd been short with him, distracted, wanting to get off the phone. 2 months later, his father died. At 51, in the 3rd session with a therapist, he finally said it out loud. I think that phone call is what kind of person I am. The therapist looked at him for a moment, then said, the ones who don't care don't ask that question. He'd needed to hear that for more than a decade. Not because it absolved him, because it was accurate. Sign 4. You confuse sensitivity with evidence. You feel things strongly. You notice when you've caused discomfort before the other person even says anything. You register the shift in their tone and their energy in the slight pause before they answer you. You're reading the room constantly, and the room rarely gives you a clean reading. And because your awareness is that precise, you've started treating the feeling itself as proof. As if your ability to sense the damage means you caused it deliberately, repeatedly, from a place of simply not caring enough. Dr. Paul Gilbert, whose decades of research at the University of Derby shaped what we now call compassionate mind therapy, drew a distinction that changes everything once you hear it. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says I did something bad. What you're experiencing, the visceral discomfort when you fall short, the inability to just move past it, is guilt. Functional guilt. The kind that drives repair and actually makes people better over time. The kind that, by definition, people without a conscience cannot feel. The sensitivity isn't the problem, it's the misread. But here's the question I need you to sit with. Has that voice inside you, the one calling you a horrible person, has it ever actually told you how to be better, or has it only ever told you how bad you are? Has it given you a direction or just a verdict? Because there's a difference between a conscience and an inner critic. A conscience guides. An inner critic just convicts. Only you know which one has been running the courtroom. Sign 5. You're convicting someone who no longer exists. Think about how old you were when you did the thing that's still following you. Think about what you knew then, about how to be emotionally present, about what to say when someone needed you and you didn't have the language for it, about what repair even looked like. You know more now. You can see clearly what you should have done differently. And that clarity feels like evidence of guilt, like proof you knew better and chose not to act on it. But it isn't. Dr. Daniel Schachter, memory researcher at Harvard University, has shown that autobiographical memory doesn't work like a recording. It reconstructs, and we reconstruct the past using our current understanding, our current standards, our current emotional vocabulary, the insight we've accumulated since then. Which means you're judging a younger, less informed version of yourself through a lens that person didn't have access to at the time. That's not justice. That's hindsight applied backwards, with full force against someone who couldn't have known what you know now. Sign 6. The harshest judge you'll ever face. Nobody outside you is holding you to the standard you're being held to right now. The person you think you wronged has probably moved on. Some of them don't know it's still something you carry. They've gone ahead with their lives while you've stayed inside this moment, cataloging it, turning it over, finding new angles to prosecute. You haven't moved on. Dr. Kristen Neff, whose research on self-compassion at the University of Texas at Austin is among the most cited work in modern psychology, found something worth sitting with. The people with the harshest inner critics, the ones most likely to lie awake measuring the gap between who they are and who they were supposed to be, consistently score the highest on measures of empathy and genuine care for others. Your capacity to judge yourself this severely isn't evidence of bad character. It's evidence of a moral architecture that most people around you simply don't have. The severity is the signal, not the verdict. Follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity. If you're a man, this particular suffering tends to stay invisible for a long time. There's no script for saying out loud, I think I might be a bad person. It doesn't fit anything men were handed growing up. So it goes internal, and it comes out sideways irritability without a clear cause distance from people who are right there in front of you, the sudden inability to be fully present when presence is exactly what's being asked for. Not because you don't care, because you care so much and have been carrying it alone for so long that it started to cost something real. The thing about a working conscience is it doesn't feel like a compass. It feels like a verdict. But here's what a verdict requires: someone who cares enough to run the trial. Broken people don't convene that court. Horrible people don't lose sleep asking if they're horrible people. Which of these hit you hardest? Drop the number in the comments. I want to know where this lands. And if someone in your life has been carrying something like this, quietly send it to them. Sometimes just having it named is enough.